Hello and welcome back to Great American Underdog, where you can find stories of strength and success from real life underdogs. Today I have a very special guest with me, someone who has had a profound impact in my life, both personally and professionally. He is someone who excels at driving business growth. He has grown 3 successful Honda dealerships and an 8-figure marketing agency, J&L Marketing, where you can outsmart your competition rather than outspend them. He is the founder and CEO of the exclusive mastermind group Me Plus Ultra, fostering a community of business leaders who come together to overcome challenges and scale to new heights. He is also the host of the Bourbon Cigars podcast, delivering actionable business insights from industry leaders. And most importantly, he's just a genuine human being, husband, father. It is my honor to welcome Scott Joseph.
Man. All right. I think we can just drop the mic and call it a day. That was great.
Right? Just end the episode now. Like, I just told everybody what you do. So, listen, Scott, I didn't want to leave anything out because you definitely, again, have had a profound impact on me, but so many others through your journey. And I think that the audience can really learn a lot from our episode today. So I'm going to dive right in. Just want to ask you, of course, number one, where'd you grow up and what were some of the early challenges you may have faced that shaped your journey early on?
I grew up in a small town, Bethel, Ohio, which is, I'd say about 40, maybe 30 to 40, depending on traffic, 30 to 45 minutes east of Cincinnati. And we're talking a high school of total 400 people. Eventually got graduated, though, here in Louisville, Kentucky, where I had 400 in each class, all boys. So Trinity High School is where I ended up graduating. So, yeah, grew up mostly in Cincinnati, and then second half of my life has been in Louisville.
Okay, fantastic. So was there any big challenges you had early on in that transition? You grew up with mom and dad, I assume?
I did. And, I got kicked out of my first high school, so that was a challenge. So
What'd you do?
Okay, that's a story for another day, my friend.
All right, we'll save it for another time. That's fine.
Right. So, I went to, my dad kids me a lot. I started college at the University of Louisville. I dropped out halfway through the first semester of my sophomore year. He was away on vacation and not on vacation, on a dealership 20 group. And when he got back, I was moved out of the house, dropped out of school, and moved back up to Cincinnati. And thought I could start my career, sell cars, become a general manager quick. And that was my goal. That was my career path.
Yeah, so you wanted to just climb the dealership ladder more than anything. Was that your first experience really in sales and marketing? Like, what were your first jobs before you ended up in the dealership?
Oh, they were all while I was in school. So, lot tech, things like that. So,
so you started from the ground up.
Nothing significant. Yeah. So, so to answer your question, yes, car sales was my first experience in selling.
Okay, fair. And then I've heard you talk on other podcasts that at first dad didn't really want you to sell. It sounds like, you started as a car tech. How did you transition into the selling piece of it? Because a lot of people out there, they say, I've had conversations, whether it's recruiting or when we do training together, Sandy and I, with, people at every level of the dealership that say, I'd like to get into sales. How do I do that? And sometimes they feel like they have roadblocks for getting into selling. How did you get into it specifically?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I've always been very competitive, and my dad did very well. And I watched as a little kid him transition from selling vacuums at Sears to selling cars and then becoming a general manager. And so as I was growing up and eventually got into those high school teen years, the lifestyle we experienced in our family and for me as a kid was night and day. So I went from wearing $3 gym shoes to any gym shoe I wanted, high school kid, those things are important. But just the things we could do, whether it was travel, the houses we were living in, it was just a drastic difference. So that was the career I wanted. I wanted to be in auto. And I watched what he did. My dad didn't have a college degree. And I sat there, and while I was working at a lot tech for my dad down at Green Tree Toyota, which is a part of the Jeff Weiler organization, I used to literally, and I was the only one to watch these tapes. I had to dust them off, but we had these sales training tapes, and this is back in the VHS days. And on my lunch break as a tech, I would put in sales training videos because I knew that was going to be my path. And I would beg my dad, let me sell, let me sell, let me sell. Because I just, a naive 18-year-old kid at the time thought I could outperform anybody on the floor. And there were some good salespeople there. And I was driven, I was ambitious, and I was ready to go, but he would never give me the chance. So, when he went out on that 20 group, I used his name and basically called up most of Jeff's stores at that time were up in Cincinnati. And I called up the Chevy store, which was their powerhouse store at the time. In terms of volume, number one profit store was my dad's. But I called up there and I asked them, if they were hiring, and they said, we're not hiring, but we do have one of our finance managers who's going to be a sales manager at a Chrysler Plymouth store we just bought, and he is looking for salespeople. Would you like to speak with him? Sure. So he asked me, how soon can you get here? I said, I can be there in an hour and a half. I drove up. Got the interview, got offered the job on the spot, and I took it and moved out. And so, man, when I can remember thinking, man, mom and dad they're going to be pissed off. And they took it well, because I think they realized at that point, what do you do? They couldn't control me at that point from a legal standpoint. And now I've got a job where I can go out and support my own, so to speak. And man, those first few months, it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. My nose got bloodied left and right. But as I got my legs under me, and at this point I'm 19 years old, as I got my legs under me, I'd have a few months here and there where I could get into that top 5 throughout the whole organization. And Jeff had like 30 some odd stores. The problem was I was just immature. And so there was no consistency in my work ethic. So I'd have the good month, I'd take off 2 months and then work again. And so, but I'll never forget. You asked for milestones. The turning point for me, and I still remember it clearly, is first few months in. And you got to remember, I'll set the stage with this. My dad was Jeff's top general manager. And so we were getting tickets to front row Reds games, front row, back then WWF, Hulk Hogan, all that stuff. And
yeah, baby.
I mean, so I just grew up really idolizing Jeff. I really liked him. So the first few months, I'm in there and he comes to visit the store and says, Scott, come on in my office. I want to talk to you. And I thought, all right, here we go.
It's my moment.
All right. That's right. First question out of his mouth. Why'd you drop out of school? And, I went and gave him all the, I didn't think it was needed. This is where I want to go. I want to become general manager. Owning stores was never on my radar at the time.
Right.
Didn't even think of it as a possibility, actually. And he went on into this long thing about how his general managers in the next 10 years, they need to know the value of the yen and versus the dollar and all this stuff that school could teach me. And I'm thinking to myself, I just need to know how to sell, right? And metal, I can figure out the rest. And by the way, there's not a general manager today that uses the value of the yen against the dollar in terms of growing their store. However, I wish I could see him. I tell him that. But he said one thing that really hit me. And he goes, in 10 years, when I'm considering you to be one of my general managers. And from that moment on, I didn't hear a thing. I'm thinking to myself, 10 years? I didn't drop out of school early to wait 10 years. Why is my age and at that, I'm naive at the time. I'm thinking 5 years, right? Heck, if I knew it was 10 years, I just stayed in school and had fun like the rest of my friends. So for me, at that point, I kind of in my gut knew that this was my initial plan wasn't going to be the direction I was going to take. And so I eventually left that store and eventually was down with my dad selling down there because I thought no one could teach me better than him. And it's just a young guy taking an easier route. And I had a lot of success there, but eventually, I had a friend who was doing very well, doing high impact sale events, direct mail type events for car dealerships. And he asked me to join. He's the L, Pat Luck, still a good friend, going to dinner with him Saturday night. But yeah, well, he dropped out of J&L. I put all my savings into it. He dropped out after a few months. We started during the Persian Gulf War, and it was a little bit hard to sell deals. Plus, we didn't know what the heck we were doing at the time.
So, Scott, let me ask you real quick. So the timetable piece, when you sat in with Weiler, was that like the spark for you or the hint for you to go and become an entrepreneur? Because it sounds like also in a way, like you were like owning a dealership, owning a business, you were so hyper focused on the automotive industry and becoming a general manager, right? So the entrepreneurship thing, was that kind of in your brain before you met with him to speak about J&L and put that together after you heard the 10-year remark? Yeah,
I think being an entrepreneur wasn't necessarily in my head at that moment, but I knew the path that I had in my mind when I dropped out of school and where I was going to go in my timeline probably wasn't realistic. It was naive thought. And so where the entrepreneurship came in is when I'm selling for my dad and I'm having success, but I'm not the person that I really wanted to be. I'm not this, I'm not succeeding at a level that I just thought I could. It's funny. My mom, I'll never forget, my mom played a key role in this as well. We were out to dinner once and we were sitting with a lot of, this is in my late teens. We're sitting with some high level executives and they're about 25 to 35 years old, but they're all super successful. And they're all talking, having their cocktails, and they're, and mom leaned over at me and she goes, "This is what I, envision for you when you get older." And so that's the vision I had in my head. And I wasn't going to get there selling cars. It just wasn't happening as quickly as I wanted it to happen. And my friend came to me, and that's when the spark happened there with Pat. He goes, "Let's form our own company." And so I started running the numbers and started thinking it, and he was having success. I felt like I was confident. I felt like, well, if he can have success, I know I can. And the two of us together could really form something special. And it just took off from there. I mean, obviously, you go through those first 12 months and there's a big learning curve and stuff, and we can talk about that if you want, but that's where the spark for being an entrepreneur happened.
Right. And it's so funny because I sold, as you know, I sold cars. I sold with Audi for about 5 years. And at the very beginning stages, same thing with me, right? I was just like, my upward momentum in my brain, the only path was corporate, that I'd work for Audi corporate and actually work for the manufacturer. And that was in my brain the big deal, right? Because I love cars too, not as much as I love people, but it's up there for me because I'm an encyclopedia in terms of knowledge with them. So for me, when I graduated college, I went through it because my father said, "You have to do it," right? Like I didn't get the opportunity. You have to go. And I want you to at least have that to fall back on, right? As a backup plan. So after I graduated, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it ended up being that I was like, I'm going to get into automotive and I'm going to work for Audi corporate. Like I just knew about the cars. And my first couple of months, I struggled just to sell because I was being Googled for people. And the reason I bring that up is because I said to myself, I've seen some level of success in terms of people at that point, the people that owned the dealership, other friends and family that I knew. And I knew I was capable for something bigger and better. And I was like, why am I struggling so much? And how do I get better? And how do I excel? So entrepreneurship was not on my brain at that point, but it sounds like you had in the sales role, that burn the boats moment of it's time to press forward, try something new. You were going into the unknown, so there was definitely that factor of it, but you also knew like, hey, I have an interest in this direct mail thing. So it sounds like you kind of had a passion for going that way, or was it more that this was just an opportunity to see what else was out there?
It's a great question. And as you ask it, I'm reminded of a few different scenarios. First off, when I told my dad what I was going to do, he said, "You'll be back here in 3 months." So that was a good motivator. but because I was very competitive with my dad, I will say that one of the things the Weilers did that I really appreciate is they paid for me to go to a workshop, an Anthony Robbins workshop. And what I really liked about that, it opened my eyes. I mean, I had done all the normal, auto dealership sales training where it's just the same word tracks and all the crap that you still hear today. Nothing new. What I liked about the Anthony Robbins training is it was a two-part workshop, if I remember it correctly. This would have been in the late 80s. Early 90s. And that was, the first part was working on me, empowering myself. The second part was more in sales and persuasion and stuff like that. But what I loved is he challenged my think. He said things differently than other people at that time. And he really got into the psychology of not, he told you what to say, but he got into the psychology as to why it works and why it doesn't work. And I just really was attracted to that. And so, when I got into, in part of that first part, the empowering part, taught us about the limiting beliefs, empowering beliefs. And I'll never forget. So when I knew I was on the wrong path with car sales, I'll never forget this conversation. Your question sparked this thought. Sitting around, it was slow. Some of us salespeople were talking, and we were talking about income for some reason. And at that point, I'm making, maybe 85. This is to 120 range. And they're talking about just $300, $400, $500,000 a year. And I remember saying, "Oh, I'll never make that." And I immediately went back and I thought immediately to myself, I was self-conscious enough or self-aware enough to sit there and say, man, that's a really bad belief. And as soon as I was thinking it to myself, the people that were not as successful as me, and quite honestly, didn't have the same drive or ambition, at least in my opinion, literally say, well, you'll never get there with that belief. And I thought to myself, if they're saying that, how bad have I gotten? Where is the guy that a year and a half to 2 years ago thought he should be a GM 4 and 5 years from now, right? That's not, and that's when I knew I'm on a wrong direction. And I was not aligned. I was not doing what I was aligned, my true purpose or what I was aligned to do. And so I think when my friend came to me about becoming an entrepreneur, I had the work ethic, but it had to align with what my true purpose is, my why, right? And that's when it took off. I think that was the real, those series of events is what did it.
That's incredible too, Scott, because a lot of times I feel like people don't look at the why piece of it and they just see the external. They see the money, the cars, houses, the social media that's curated, especially in today's world. And a lot of the younger generation, I feel like, has this skewed idea of what success looks like. And it really looks like what it feels, well, not looks like, it's what it feels like internally. You have to feel successful before the outside world can replicate that and duplicate that externally. And you have to feel like it's possible. So knowing your why allows you to say, hey, if I know my why, I know what is possible with this belief system. And a lot of times I feel like you in the sales role, you kind of got derailed because, you're talking about money that's 300, 400, 500,000. It's not a lot of money, but to somebody making 85 to 120,000, it is. And it feels like it could be
Correct.
such a huge gap away to the point where if these people are, telling me that it's not possible, it must not be because they're not trying to go after it. And then you had people who didn't have the same drive as you saying, yeah, you could go out and do that, no problem. And you're like, wait a second, something's not aligning. So kudos to you for recognizing that. And then when you jumped in with your friend, like, did you have those feelings of what if I fail? And, at first, and did you overcome that uncertainty in any type of way?
There was no belief that I would fail until I started getting rejected.
Right.
When I went into the business model, I thought, once again, I was back, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny. I remember getting out of selling cars and thinking, oh man, don't have to work these Saturdays anymore. Naive still, immature right. Still. For the next 5 years, it was 7 days a week, literally 52 weeks a year. First 2 years alone, I drove because, we didn't have internet back then. So I drove to sell clients. I was driving 55,000 miles a year. So, yeah. And I did that for 2 consecutive years in a row. I didn't track it after the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, but, it probably started to go down a little bit. But it was nonstop, but it didn't feel like work because I was aligned with what I should be doing at that time in my life. And so it was a big grind while all my friends were going to school and or at this point, because I'm 22 when I started this company, J&L, they're all graduating, but they're still having fun. They're working a job. They're going out on Friday, Saturday nights, and even Sunday nights. I'm working. I'm never home. So the occasional time I would be back and do something, it was nice, but I was never, I wasn't that social in my 20s, but while all my friends were working their butt off in their 30s, I got to do things that they could never afford to do in my 30s. And quite honestly, if you're successful, once you get successful, it's much more fun having the choice of doing things then than when it is, when you're not.
Yeah. And also it opens the door to way more opportunities and possibilities because of just whether it's your relationships, obviously the money, financial piece, et cetera. But again, I think people get a little bit confused in terms of what they really need to do if they want to achieve very high levels of success. And like you just mentioned, driving 55,000 miles a year, you have people that won't even post on social media, but then claim they want a certain type of life. So, it's incredible to me that you had the fortitude at 22 years old to say, I'm going to go out and do this and really push myself and skip the going out piece, because that's a very easy temptation at 22 years old, so
it is.
Yeah. And then
I go out a lot, but Ron, I go out a lot now.
Yeah. Well, listen, but you earned that. And the other thing too, is the time,
that's right.
The time that it took, it's another thing that I feel like it's underestimated, or people that feel like, it's too late for me. That's the flip side of it, because I feel like it's really never too late. It's just, again, like we mentioned before, you left automotive sales to find something that was more in alignment with what you truly want to do. So at this point, you have J&L, you've built up a book of business by traveling and meeting dealers where they are, which is incredible. Kudos to you. and now was it always the outsmart in order to, rather than outspend your competition? Was that always the thing for you? And early on with J&L, was that something that was in your head in terms of a differentiator?
Who I was then and who I am now are literally two different human beings. Move the crowd, crush the competition, count the money. So that speaks to the personality and the culture of our company at the time. When we pivoted full on into digital marketing and paid media, it was much easier, that it made much more sense in terms of outsmarting competition versus outspending them. And that was really who we were and what made us great. So, which is what we're doing now. I mean, so I think the new tagline pivoted along with when the company made the pivot to digital marketing.
I gotcha. And then just now you have J&L, when did the opportunity to, I guess, full circle in a way, get back into the dealership as an owner? Like, how did that now happen?
Well,
Because that's the next piece for you from J&L, right?
Yeah, well, you said it, right? When you have success over that period of time, you're going to build relationships, and new opportunities are going to emerge. And through some of my relationships, it actually came from Steve Gates, owns the Gates Automotive Group, and I think it's up to 12, 15 rooftops. But he was one of our first 5 clients for J&L Marketing. And his CPA had a client whose brother was running the store. He was the operator and also half owner. You know, he had passed away. And the other brother who owned the other half, he was a very wealthy venture capitalist. He wanted no part of automotive. So he put it out for a silent bid. And we were one of 5 companies that got the bid, and we won that first store by outbidding. This is Johnson City Honda now. We won that bid by literally $150,000. Yeah. That store, we bought that store for $3.65 million. Today, we would not sell it for less than 40. So that's a
great thing. And it's incredible, just that little 150K split, and look at the success of it from just being able to win by that much, you know? So in the grand scheme of things, that's huge. And, you know, again, just because you've taken this entrepreneurial journey, I'm focusing a lot on that piece, Scott. So I thank you for just, you know, giving me some additional details about the journey up to this point, because I want people to understand you and why you've gone down this path. And for the entrepreneurs in the audience that might be facing challenges and even maybe disruption, maybe they started with a specific product and they're having to pivot or shift, you know, what recommendations would you give to those entrepreneurs in the audience who are dealing with challenges and disruption, especially in today's world with the way technology is going?
You have got to give up the idea of being really just married to your idea, your product, or your service. And you've got to really listen to your clients. I can say that it doesn't matter what business I've been involved in. We'll start with J&L. You know, when I first started doing it, I'd have very inconsistent results with the campaigns we were doing. And so what I did, part of those 55,000 miles, is I literally drove and interviewed our best performing dealers, and their owners, their general managers, some of their top sales. I wanted to know what are these people all have in common that they're doing that these other people that are getting similar traffic are not doing? Why are they successful? It can't be just they have better sales team. They had to have different processes, things they were doing. And I was able to come up with 7 things that they literally did, spread out over before, during, and after every event. There were 7 things all our successful stores did. And so all I did was create a manual, and then we prepped every store from that point forward, every store, on doing these 7 things. And lo and behold, they started going off. And then, of course, we're tracking data, and all that comes from listening to our clients, because they want to know where it's working, what it's not. Because as marketers, our job is to improve on what works and eliminate what doesn't. And so we created that. That came from listening to clients. They wanted more. I'll never forget the support part. It really came from one phone call. And so I tell Sandy all the time, I really got lucky. He hates me saying that, but none of this was a strategy out of the gate. It was all responding to what clients were saying and or not saying in terms of, buying from us. And so with the support thing, I'll never forget the first event I ever did that just blew it out of the water. He sold like 65 cars in one day. Jack Walker, Pontiac, Toyota. They're not even a high volume store at the time. But that one sale, I mean, it was very difficult for me to gain clients at that point. That one sale, in my inexperience in selling, I'd go back to everybody else I was working and tell them what happened, and all of a sudden, sign. But On my way up to work his event, I'll never forget it. I called into the office. Back then I didn't have cell phone. So I go to a payphone. I call in the office. Yep. The general manager had left me a message. So I put in my quarters and I call him. He goes, I wanted to make sure this event's still on. I haven't heard from you. I said, yeah, I'm almost there, and stuff like that. And I remember thinking to myself, what a horrible experience for my client. And I thought, I've got to have a process and I'm not a process guy. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I knew from that point forward, we were going to start prepping our stores, anywhere from 10 days prior, walk them through. And that's when the whole 7 steps started coming in and all this other stuff. But that in itself worked as its own marketing angle, because every one of us had a process. It changed our sales process. We sell a deal. We're prepping the client. We're calling during and the first business day effort. We're calling immediately and re-signing. So it also became a sales and marketing, its own marketing process as well. And it showed continued support. It was value above and beyond what they were buying. Now, eventually it made its way into the sales pitch, which helped even more, right? But then you look at J&L. Our digital products today are night and day different compared to what they were, and a lot of it has to do with our OEM clients. When you have clients that are spending 7 figures in ad spend with you, they look a lot closer at the results and, more importantly, why they're either happening or not happening than, say, the dealer that might be spending $8,000 a month. And what's great about that is it puts a lot of pressure on you. It can be tough. It can be challenging because it's constant, but it makes you constantly improve your own processes internally to provide more value, better results. How do we look at this data differently? How can we be on it more? How do we make sure we can manage more and more clients from a scalability issue without making it, to me, each client should feel like they have one analyst and that one analyst has one client only, right? So how do we give the level of support they need? How do we make sure that we're constantly tweaking and adjusting their spend in Google or wherever else we've got it set up in their ad campaigns to make sure we're optimizing results? And what's beautiful about the OEM and listening to that feedback and constantly taking that and adjusting is you then start working that into the individual dealer. We have dealers that spend $3,000 a month that are getting the same level of service, as a client that might be spending millions, because our processes have evolved to the point. I mean, we have one client that said, there's no way you're getting all of this, or had one client had a competitor of ours tell one client, there's no way they're supporting your deal this and only charging you that.
Yeah, but that goes directly
it's all
to the
tracked.
point.
All the changes are tracked. Everything's tracked. So you can see it. It's all done.
Actually, you want to see? Go ahead. Here you go.
That's right. And then we're communicating with them nonstop. It's not like, set it, forget it, call them. Oh yeah. What do you suggest? Okay, we'll make that change for you. No, we're making the suggestions, and our clients can either do that or not, but go with it. But those are two examples: listening to your client, but more importantly, acting on it, executing on it. If it's a good idea, and can it make all your clients better? So that's or provide more value to all your clients. I would say, gosh, you got to do that, assuming you have the work ethic and you're willing to do what it takes to be successful.
And a willingness to put the ego aside of saying like, hey, my product can get better. My service can get better. I can add more
100%.
value, and actually, like you said, listen and then take action upon the feedback. So like entrepreneurs out there, if you're listening, or selling professionals, if you're listening, anybody that's serving clients, you need to be able to take advice, feedback, and then actually implement it. And like you said, Scott, like the work ethic piece really comes into play. If I sat and talked to you about what I do in business with Sandy, and I asked for feedback from you and you gave it to me, and then I did nothing with it, number one, it would be like, well, you could easily say, I'm not going to spend any more time talking to Ron and giving him advice. He doesn't do anything with it, And then number two, I'm not going to be able to test and get data back to say, hey, this is good, this is bad. I can keep this, I can get rid of this. So, like, again, you like mentioning, just listen to people and what the marketplace is actually asking for, I think is the big lesson there, right?
Well, I sit here and watch, like, I know you guys execute, and more importantly, I know you adjust, and I can tell the way you adjust because I follow you guys on, you and Sandy on social media, and I see how your messaging has adjusted. I see how your product and your services have adjusted based on feedback you're getting. And you're all over it. You can see the momentum. And people want to do business with people that have, that upward trajectory, that momentum. It's because once you get momentum, if you ever lose a momentum, it's hard to get it back. People will all want to participate in that. And so I love what you guys are doing.
I appreciate that. And then, Scott, what deeper purpose, at this level of success that you've had through your businesses, through J&L, we haven't even touched, and we're about to get there, Me Plus Ultra and Business Bourbon Cigars, which I'm amped about. Yeah. But out of all the success you've had, what continues to drive you for pushing growth rather than settling for comfort? Because, even at my level right now, right? My dad's a working class guy. Thank God he's retired now at 71 years old. I'm so happy about that. But he would always.
When did he retire?
Literally this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Working since he's 14 years old in all types of different industries, construction, safety, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, super exciting to have him retire. But he's one, grew up in a time where, like, I need something viable to work with. I need to be able to make a paycheck and then be able to pay my bills to support my family. So you have a lot of people out there that would say, well, once you get to that point, stop pushing because you've made it, right? Like, why do you have to keep going after these such big aspirations? There's no reason, the people out there, the naysayers, there's no reason for you to make seven figures. If your family's healthy and everybody's making, ends are being met, bills are paid, etc. So, for the audience, how do you push, I guess, past that level of, the noise of people saying that to you, and then also falling into the comfort trap? What's the deeper purpose for you, Scott, that keeps you excelling and growing and wanting to get better?
Everybody has a comfort zone. And when I was first starting off, I was outside of my comfort zone because I felt I was failing. And so I wanted to grow it and grow it and grow it. And when you're early on, I had the luxury at my age of not having a lot of responsibilities. So, earlier you brought up some people feel like they can't necessarily do something later in life. Well, there's more risk later in life usually for the norm for most people because maybe they're married, maybe they've got kids, so for me, I didn't have any of that when I started it. So I had that luxury, but I was at least self-aware enough to know that if I'm going to take this chance, now's a good time to do it because of that reason. But to answer your question, I bring up comfort zones because I think people look at very successful people and think, oh, wow, they're never worried about their comfort zone. They bust right through that stuff. But I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what level you're at, you have one. And so what ends up happening is, and you hear the term, well, they just got fat, right? They got comfortable. And you stop growing. And so there comes a time I achieved what every entrepreneur in my mind probably at least thinks about or wants to achieve at some point. And that is, I had the agency, I had the 3 dealerships, and I got them to a point where I had elevated and delegated. I've got managing partners in all of them, where it's 100% passive income for me. I don't ever have to say anything. I'm not involved in any of the operations currently in any of those businesses. And so, I could just live on a beach, right? And the money still comes. And so, because I've got good operators, They do a great job in terms of with our clients, our processes, our client experience, and ultimately the bottom line. But I had in my path to that, in my journey to that, J&L was where I was most involved. And there was this pivot to get there should have taken maybe 1 year, and it took 5. All right. Because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And J&L was my ego, right? That was my thing. That was my first. That was what I started from scratch. I bought the stores. That was my baby. And there was a control issue, right? I had Jamil, he's my managing partner now. He's our current president. I thought I was giving up control, but I wasn't. And no company can do well when it's got a two-headed monster, two-headed leader at it, especially when their leadership styles are so drastically different. And his and mine are night and day. And I would both work very well, by the way, but not together. Not together in the sense that you can't have two people have the same amount of power or not. Or I should say, I guess I would, since I had the bigger percentage, right, I'd have more power. But he's the one with all the knowledge and the closest relationships with the clients. He's the one with a better handle on operations. He's a better handle on the culture. He's the one that really is doing all the operations and all the dirty work that takes it to drive the company forward. So when I come in with stuff over above him, it's destructive. And so I had to take a hard look at myself. And I realized, because I was on to something, with the business bourbon and cigars stuff and something Sandy and I came up with together. And I knew I wanted to go there, but what was keeping me from just making that what I did? And I think it came down to ego and comfort zone. I did not want to lose what I had. And I think I was fearful of going in and starting over again at this stage in my life, and giving up. What if that fails and then J&L suffers because I'm not involved? And so I just realized, listen, you're not involved in the dealerships anymore. And they seem to be doing just as good, if not better. And lo and behold, I got the hell out of J&L, not from an ownership standpoint, but from an operation standpoint. It's never done better. I mean, we are cranking, because I just took the handcuffs off of my partner, right? And he's just running with it, man. And he's just doing awesome. And so I think it became that realization, a lot of soul searching and realizing you have a comfort zone in all the things that you're preaching to people about destroying limiting beliefs and creating more empowering beliefs, things that you used to have. This level of success has changed that for you. And it's time to go through that again. And ultimately that's what happened. And so I started Me Plus Ultra. Business bourbon and cigars on its own is not a business. And so as I was sitting there thinking through this, I had the vision that this has to be a mastermind group that involves the events. And so, because that's a true business. And quite honestly, these last 3 years have been the most enjoyable and successful 3 years of my business and personal life.
So starting Business Bourbon Cigars, Me Plus Ultra, just to, unpack a little bit of what you said, I even have had that happen in my own life, Scott, where I can tell people that look up to me and are inspired by me. Let's just say, it's in working out or boxing or business. And I give them some level of advice, and then I'm in the weeds and I'm not taking my own advice. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to recognize that happened inside of you to be able to say, like, what would you tell yourself in this situation if you were, somebody that you've given advice to in the past? So, being able to remove yourself from the equation a lot of times and your feelings so that way you can execute and move forward and get outside of that comfort zone, I think is such a great point, and that can happen at any level of your life.
When things that used to excite you become mundane, you know you're no longer living your why or your purpose. And that's where I had become. And I thought having all this passive income and wow, got it to where I thought I wanted to end up, but that wasn't the case anymore. And, getting back to that ego, sometimes starting something new, it's not about your fear of failure, because once you leave a certain level of success, I could start it and fail it. That's not gonna mean anything to me financially, but my ego would take a big blow, right? And so there was this fear of failing in front of people. That was the real issue for me, and that's what I had to realize. What are you doing? Who cares? Go, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and being willing to take those chances, and like you said, failing in front of other people. I mean, if people haven't been on stage more since humans have been on this planet than right now, I think that's something that really stops people in their tracks as well. But thank you for unpacking that, because I think it's super helpful information for everyone listening. And then just moving forward into Me Plus Ultra, why a leadership group, why this type of community, Scott, and what really sets apart this type of format of incredible thought leaders? I've been a part of it since almost the first one. That's the only one I've ever missed. And I'm super grateful for it. And I can pontificate on why it's different, but just from your own words, what separates this from any other leadership group or business group that might be out there, and why should people join?
It's the people. I don't want to say that people don't join a peer group or some type of mastermind group because of the people, because I think that plays a role in everybody's decision. But I don't think it's going into it the number one reason. I think most people go into something like what we have with Me Plus Ultra because they're sitting there saying, I know this much. I want to level up my personal and professional life, but I need help getting there. I don't want to go through this long learning curve. I want to tap into the knowledge of other people that have been there, done that, and get there quicker. Make it easier, make it less expensive, make it more successful. But I think if you ask people in our group why they stay, they'll tell you the results are there, but the number one reason they stay is the people and the relationships that have formed. The success stories are through the roof, but a lot of it has to deal with, because now you've got a strong relationship with this person, or I've got a strong relationship with you. And I mean, I'm involved in multiple businesses now that I would have never even dreamed of, but the opportunities just present themselves. I'm working on something right now that is going to be extremely transformative in an industry you well know. And I can't tell you what that is yet, but once that gets down the path, that's going to be a game changer on a global scale. It's the biggest thing I've ever thought of. It is the biggest, hugest idea, right? Bigly idea. This is an idea that 5 years ago I would have said somebody ought to invent this. But because of my relationships within this group, I literally looked at this is going to be the easiest thing I've ever done. I can't believe no one else has thought of this. And that's where I'm at. And it's just like, I give everything I got to this group, and I do it because it is my why. It is my purpose. Like I enjoy connecting people, but not just connecting people. If I connect somebody, it's because there's a diverse skill set and they both got great vision. But I truly believe by connecting these two people or these three people, there's a synergy there, or they've got to meet, because if they can, they could really accomplish something incredible, something great together, whether it's a strategic alliance, a new business idea, whatever that might be. And I don't leave it at connecting it. man, I drive it. And so it's like when I believe you two people need to meet and here's why, I try to push it forward with those two until it's a no-brainer for them because I do feel like I've got good vision, but you know, the only thing I get out of that is joy. And I'm just at a stage in my life where it feels like the more I give, things just fall into my lap and I'm not even asking for it. It's just like it's coming back to me. And I think the key in life is we give without the expectation of getting something in return. If we're doing it in a sincere way and genuine because we're trying to help people, I think God rewards you. And I just truly believe I'm fortunate in that area. I wish I would have figured it out 30 years ago.
One thing you sparked an idea in my brain. It's like, I feel like though, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. I feel like people that are looking to make connections and network, like you said, you drive the connection. They don't know how to necessarily activate their network or activate the connections that they've made. Like, right. People think of connecting and they still think, most of them, of I'm going to hand somebody my business card. Oh, I made a connection. They'll follow me on social media, right? Like that does literally nothing other than they're going to take that card and it's going to end up in their center console. Like
I'll like a few of their LinkedIn posts. I'll make a few comments. I'll send them some nice messages, 2 or 3, and then I'll hit them with my pitch. It's like, that is just,
that's
that'll work somewhat, but if it's not a real connection.
But if somebody that was, let's just say, building a business from the ground up and they met you at a networking event, and like you said, like you have to give to get. And I agree 100% with that and adding value up front if you ever expect to receive anything in return. But for somebody that's going to approach someone like you who is successful in their business ventures, they might not feel like they know what can I give this man that has what seems like everything, right? Because the way that they view success is, well, they got the businesses, the houses, the traveling, etc. What are those people that are going to these events? What do they give someone like you? Is it their time? What is it?
I think the key, I don't know if I can answer what they have to give to me, but
if they want to connect with you, I think I can make an impact on you, right? Like, how would they do that?
Yeah, I think I can explain what works for me. And by the way, I wasn't good at this in the first half of my life. Think about our tagline: move the crowd, crush your competition, count the money. That's a very isolated, we're going to focus on what we can get and what we can do attitude. That is what I do. And so I think I approached business that way. I didn't have a lot of strategic alliances. I had a network, but most of my network was my vendors and my clients. There wasn't anything in the middle of non-vendors that I was working with together and trying to improve and level up. All the self-improvement I did on my own. But now I think what works. And so when I had engagements in networking, to your point, where I think people fail, they go in thinking, all right, how can I help this person so I can get this in return? I think what works for me now is I don't care if I get anything in return, so it makes it easy. And so I have a sincere interest in them. I listen better. I still finish people's sentences, but I listen better than I used to listen. And the listening is because I have a curiosity about people, what they do. And if I find someone that I really like and is a good person, they get good values, they've got good business, I want to introduce them to my other friends and that I think can help. And so and I think that's the key. I think it's not about, people think that they're giving something, but when you're giving for your reasons, in the end, they're really about your reasons. I think that's where it falls apart.
Yep.
And so,
I share a sentiment with you where we're interested in people. And I also like to find out what makes people tick. And part of the reason I started, the podcast too is for that reason, and find
Yeah.
out the why a lot of times. So, I totally agree.
Well, one of the things, Ron, that makes it unique, though, in terms whether it's our virtual, for Me Plus Ultra, whether it's our virtual hot seats and expert speakers or the live events with Business Bourbon and Cigars, just because what I just said, that doesn't make it comfortable for everybody, especially if they're not in a place where they feel maybe they're not I feel very confident, because my network has grown that, wow, I know somebody that can help you or somebody. And so whether it's referrals or just connecting you and talking about ideas, why aren't you guys doing this and this? What if you guys form something like this? And you could really improve your value proposition to your clients if you did this. And so I'm giving them ideas, but that's because I know each one very well. But for someone that's new, that maybe is just trying to build that network, is not good at that yet, doesn't have the same level of joy that gives me, right? Maybe they're not strong. Maybe they're so good at executing, but they're not as good on the vision part, right? One of the things that separates our group is you've been involved in our to me, mastermind is one of the most thrown around terms. And I think it's because it's a good marketing term, but ours are real masterminds. When you're working on your own issue and then we bring everybody together and you're getting feedback from everybody, and that second person's commentary, feedback on your action plan or your idea or your solution to solve a problem you have or a challenge you have. And all of a sudden you're improving in that. And that spurs the thought of the third person. And the third person goes, yeah, and you could add this. And then the fourth, and all the way to 7 to 10, or depending on how big the group is at the time. There's a synergy there, and you're all working together and helping each other. So when we get together and do the networking part, our activities and our excursions, there's no cliques. There's no awkwardness to the networking. Everyone's friends at that point because they've been helping everybody. Everybody's been giving. And it's the more you give in that environment that makes it easier to become real friends. I mean, we have a mutual friend in Mario Ficini. He's asking me the other day, so I'm getting ready to do a book. He's helping me publish it. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it through a friend. That's him. And he's interviewing me and he's asking me, well, how long have you known Sandy? How long have you known Arnold Gassita? How long have you known Dave Boyle, Troy Duhan, all these people, right? And they're all inside of, besides Sandy's like 5 or 6 years, actually longer, but close friends, 5 or 6 years, might be longer than that now. Most of them are 3 years or less. And he goes, he couldn't believe it. And when I thought about it, I couldn't believe it either. What we've built here in this community, some of my it's not just about business. Some of my best friends are, and there's nobody in this group. I drop everything I'm doing when I get a text, a call. When I get those calls or text messages from this group, I drop what I'm doing and I try to help immediately, or I get back to them quickly and say, let me call you back in 30 or 40, whatever it is, an hour. That's what I mean by having more joy and having a more enjoyable experience over these last 3 years. It's not just professionally. We've had more success than we've ever had from a professional standpoint, but the real gain has been the friendships. Personally, I've never been a better spot in my life. And it's, none of that was planned. None of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like you mentioned God before, and I believe in higher power. I believe in God. And I think that comes to you because you have that genuine approach towards helping people. Right. And you just have to have the faith that those things are going to come to you over time. Just because, again, you're not doing it with the expectation of return. So I think that's one of the biggest things if you're in business selling, but also just being a good human being is like, I want to be able to provide and give back in the best way that I can to the people that may have never done a thing for me. But if I feel I could do something for them, even if it's just an idea or a connection, that really is a game changer. So I love that, Scott, and I'm super appreciative of the community you built with Me Plus Ultra, as I know so many people are. Because again, like you said, it's not just a mastermind group where you have talking heads of people trying to pitch you a product and sell you something and tell you about why their business is so great. It's really more about how everybody comes together to help each other. So thank you for that opportunity to do that.
We love having you as a member.
Yeah,
we
man,
love having you as a member.
Thank you. And then just as we wrap up here, I have some questions for you more towards like, legacy and things like that. Just as someone who's built some incredible relationships, businesses over the years, what legacy do you really, I guess, hope to leave? And what's the number one thing that you hope people learn from your journey?
The number one thing I want to do is I want to help children in need. You were at the last event where I've always wanted to do that, but actions speak louder than words. Outside of donating some money here and there, I was not really involved and didn't play a key part or have an impact. And I feel I have that opportunity now. I went on a trip with Troy with Giving Hope. In the end, Ron, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
You're not your great grandfather, your great great grandfather. What was his full name?
Right.
What was it?
You don't know. It's exact point.
No, I don't know mine either.
Right.
And most people probably don't even know their great grandfather's full name or grandmother. It doesn't matter. So I think legacy is a bullshit term. And because in the end, and this goes back to God, in the end, all the shit you think you're accomplishing here on this earth, unless you've done something like, and let's face it, let's take Steve Jobs. Pretty good legacy in terms of how he's impacted the world, right? But let me tell you something, in 100 years, there's nobody that's going to know Steve Jobs. Not one person. Because the technology is going to change. There'll be a different impact, and no one's going to give two shits about this iPhone or anything else he has accomplished. He'll be a forgotten soul. Your legacy is imagine, and it has nothing to do, you won't be remembered for it. So it's really about your impact. And so if you could change just one person's life, one child, right? And you break them out of that poverty cycle. Think about this. And that has a ripple effect from that point forward to the family that they're associated, instead of poverty to poverty to poverty. All of a sudden, that one family moves outside of poverty, moves into middle class, whatever it might be. And maybe from there, someone else goes on to be success. The ripple effect from that. And then how do they impact people? It's about impact. It's not about legacy. And no one will remember. If I went to the Philippines and I had some type of impact because of money we donated or the time we did out there, no one will remember that. But it's irrelevant. That's the way I look at it. All that's relevant, all that matters is, did I impact someone's life for the better? And will that ripple on down the line? And for me, that's what's most important.
Scott, it is for me too. And it just genuinely is, because at the end of the day, like you said, Mike Tyson said it recently. Somebody interviewed him leading up to the Jake Paul fight. And they said, what legacy do you hope you leave after this fight? He goes, legacy? He goes, that doesn't mean anything. He goes, legacy is ego. Like, nobody's going to care about me when I'm gone. Like, I'm just here to provide for my family and go home. And that's kind of what he did. But the point of the legacy is ego is such a profound point, because I think people get so caught up in the ego of wanting to be remembered a certain way, or what did I do when I was here?
Vanity.
It's vanity.
It's all vanity. It's in the Bible. I mean, it's all talked about. There is nothing earthly that will be remembered or count for anything,
right?
Other than the impact, other than what your purpose is, God's purpose is for you. That's it.
Yeah, and that's a topic in and of itself, of course, Scott. Because again, like the impact piece, you make an impact on one of those kids in the Philippines, and then they ripple effect to the next generation, et cetera, et cetera. They might not know your name, but that stayed with them because it was something that allowed them to reach higher levels in life. just to be able to feed their families, water, things that certain Americans take for granted.
That's
again,
right.
like just being able to take a hot shower was 50 years ago. You were able to start taking hot showers.
We were feeding people inside of their neighborhood. They lived in the landfill.
Yeah.
It was emotional. It was heartbreaking. Happiest people I've ever seen. It was literally, it's called Happy Land.
Yeah.
It's the poorest part of the Philippines. It was tough to see because you're like, you want to feel bad. There's this weird pull because you're seeing them so happy. And at the same time, you realize what they don't have, but they don't care.
No.
Their faith in God and their just belief. And it's a really weird dynamic emotionally to go through that. And it changes you.
Sure. And it's definitely empowering. So, Scott, just as we close out here, if anybody out there that's writing their own underdog story, that's overcoming obstacles and challenges in their life, what would you say is the biggest action step that they can take to move forward and overcome those challenges?
Well, I would have said initially, and this still applies, you got to be willing. You got to have a strong work ethic.
Okay.
No matter what you do. Having said that, build relationships, build a network, do it the right way. It's not just about help people. The fastest way to build your network and build relationships is by helping each other. But you can't do it because you're thinking, I got to build my network so that way I know in the end I'll be successful. That's the wrong approach.
Right.
It's a tough balance. And I emphasize this every time because I do think people go out there and well, I'm going to start helping people. But their real purpose is just, that's transparent and that's easy to see through.
Right.
And so I think it's got to be sincere and you don't want anything. I don't care if I come up with a killer idea that it's not mine to do and I give it to someone that it's a great fit for, I don't expect anything. I don't need anything. For that, I give to give.
Right. So I love that. I just had that happen to me at the gym recently. I just gave this kid a pair of gloves because he's just shown so much interest in boxing and just being able to help him hold hand pads for him. He has a level of autism. And I don't expect him to ever do anything for me, and I don't want him to. I just want to be able to help him build his confidence. And for me, there's no money involved in that. There's nothing external involved in that other than I get to help somebody improve their life. And for me, I made an impact just now, right? And
you never know the smallest gesture. You know the story of Muhammad Ali.
Of course.
I'm here in Louisville. He grew up in Louisville. Another kid stole his bike when he was 12 years old. He went and told the policeman. The policeman said, you got to take all that anger. Let me take you to the gym. Literally, that's how it started. And that one gesture of this policeman helping this young kid, boom.
Gave us Muhammad Ali. Yeah.
It turns into one of the biggest influencers the world's seen, right?
Yep.
So.
Yes, God, so true. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in today for another great episode of Great American Underdog, where you can find stories of strength and success from real life underdogs. Scott, I want to thank you again just for being here. You've been so gracious with your time and just providing some real insight that I think a lot of people listening will take away from. And just lastly, where can people find more info on you, Me Plus Ultra, and the Business Bourbon Cigars podcast, or J&L?
Well, me personally, most of the social networks, I'm all over LinkedIn, IG, X, and Facebook. But meplusultra.com. If they go there, there's all kinds of ebooks, free, no email required. You can get them, download them. That can help you on your journey. A lot of them, one of them is about mastermind groups to find the easiest path to find the right group for you. If this motivated you at all, that's free to download. And you can also get all our podcasts there. And of course, our YouTube channel, which is the Me Plus Ultra Network. So
beautiful. I'll include all those links in the bottom in the description for everyone. And until next time, we'll see you on the next episode of Great American Underdog. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
My pleasure.